Yo, what is up, guys? It's your boy Skull and Bones 212 here, and in today's Gears of War E-Day video, we're going to be talking about weapon attachments and possible weapons coming to Gears of War E-Day. So this is a video that I wanted to cover a little while ago. I wanted to go more in depth about weapon attachments, how they could work, what weapon attachments we can see come to the game. I'll show later on how weapon attachments worked in Gears of War Tactics, and if that's something that we can see returning in Gears E-Day. Will it be the same format? Will we see the same wording? Will we see the same attachments return or different ones? And one other thing that I want to talk about specifically is what weapons can return from the novels or comics that didn't have the chance to get introduced into any of the games. So without further ado, let's dive into it. Right, so starting off, we're going to be tackling the grenades or returning grenades we could see coming to E-Day. First off, we're going to start off with the flashbang that was teased within the E-Day Direct. I was able to get a screenshot and find it on top of a police car. So this can lead to one of many things. Either this is a new grenade altogether and it's not a flashbang, or it is a flashbang with a new redesigned top. We do know that it is very plausible, since this is the Locust era, to be getting a lot of legacy grenades back. I wanted to include some other ones that were honorable mentions, like the shock grenade, incendiary, and smoke. We do have a frag grenade, but that is the Pendulum War era frag grenade. I did include the shock grenade, but I don't think we can see that. The stim grenade has a very high chance of coming back, as that was Locust era. The ink grenade, and then I also want to start off with the smoke. Smoke's universal in Gears. We can be getting smokes as our loadout grenade for multiplayer, horde, or even campaign if the cards are in our favor. Now, how do I think the grenades will function? Well, I think they're going to stick to the Gears 5 grenades, not the Gears 4 or 3 grenades, how they had to bounce, you had to aim your trajectory and make them land in a specific spot. I think it's going to be more like Gears 5, where when you throw your smoke, it detonates on impact. So where you throw it is where it goes. Same thing with the flashbang. They're taking away the stun from the smoke and enabling you to do that with this flashbang. The only other thing that I could want more than this is the Gears of War 2 smoke grenade with the ragdoll. Now, the next thing I want to talk about are the weapons. This is the juicy part of the video that I want to start talking about. We have infinite potential for many weapons to come into this game. And the reason I say that is because Gears 5 gave us a taste of what DLC weapons could be in the life cycle of a Gears game. So here we talk about the basics: the Gnasher, the Prototype Lancer, the Retro Lancer, Snub, the Mark I Hammerburst. We also talk about the Breach Shot, and we know the Marks is going to be here, the Gut Puncher Grenade Launcher, frag grenades, and the new Troika, the new Boom Shot before it was formatted into the handheld version, and new Locust Shotgun, the Incinerator. So we have gotten Locust Shotguns before, but the thing is, it was just repurposed weapons that already existed with like knives added to them. And an example of this was in Rom Shadow. We ended up getting the sawed off, and it had like blades on it that you could retro charge with. It wasn't that really revolutionary, as the weapons still function the same, but it was still a cool little touch to show that the Locust had taken their cruel little spin on a weapon we had all come to know and love. Now, diving into weapons that we could see return, we do see here in the E-Day Direct, you go over the Incinerator, how it fires emulsion and incinerates your enemies at close range. It's still a shotgun, so it's utilizing shells. Even though I know the base function of the weapon is utilizing emulsion, it does beg the question, will shotguns be able to use different types of shotgun shell rounds, i.e. explosive rounds, dragon's breath rounds? I know that's like far out there, but at the same time, it's really not. You see, in Gears of War Tactics, when you're customizing your weapons, you can change the ammunition types to incendiary rounds and other types of ammunition types, acid rounds and stuff like that. So who's to say that in Gears of War E-Day we don't get that and have the option to play around with it? The next thing I want to talk about are some of the major legacy weapons, like the Hammerburst Mark I we've gotten, the Hammerburst Mark II, the Breach Shot, the Sawed Off, the Tripwire Crossbow from Judgment, the Scoped Marksa from Judgment, the Bushka from Judgment, the Scorcher, the Gorgon Pistol, Boom Shield, the One-Shot Sniper Rifle, and the Mortar. Obviously, we know we'll be getting a variation of the Mulcher in this game, along with a bunch of other handheld heavy weapons. But it is nice to put them up on screen here for you guys to see what we could possibly get as DLC or on the release of the game that we just haven't been shown yet. We do know that a lot of these weapons will be customizable, so I'm assuming that when we pick them up, our attachments and our saved customization will apply to the weapon as soon as we pick it up, and it can be changed quickly from the menu after a match or before the next mission loads up. Now, a lot of people are wondering what are going to be in these slots. In the slots, I'd like to come and, probably just estimate that we could be seeing attachments like ammunition types, changing the type of ammo you put into your weapon, alongside changing the stock, the barrel, the sight, and the magazine, all attributing to the factor of how the weapon moves, feels, and acts. It can be different from every build, and I think that plays a crucial role into the new precedent they're trying to set for this game. I say this because GearsOfWarE-DAY is introducing for the first time ever destroyable cover in a game, which means that some pieces of cover will not be able to last the entirety of a gunfight, which means you're going to have to constantly move through cover to stay alive. We know that the equation in Gears is that cover is life, and with this new, style being implemented, it shows that we can't really just stay and play the same cover for the whole game. We have to move. We have to continuously play around the map and find ways to play around people's weapon builds, because they can have builds tailored specifically to chew you through cover, which I think is really good, because it's not fun all the time to play Gears and just shoot at people taking cover and not leaving said cover for the longest time. I think this prevents camping. It prevents people from holding one spot and having a power spot the entire match. I think it brings a lot of diversity and replayability into the game. The next thing I want to talk about, though, moving on from that and how attachments and, all the other stuff, I will show some clips of Gears Tactics and how all of that works and what it could look like in GearsOfWarE-DAY to give you guys a better picture. But I do want to talk about some notable mentions of weapons that were in the comics and other weapons that we could come to see in this game, as we are just freshly leaving the Pendulum Wars. And these are guns that have always been here. They've never just had the spotlight to appear in a game. So let's dive into that. So in the comics and the novels, UIR weapons were far and in between. There were talks of SMGs being used by the UIR, their famous and infamous LMGs, which was the standard issue infantry weapons that they carried instead of the Lancers like the COG carried. There wasn't any notable things that I saw about like shotguns that they carried. So it was possible that the UIR just didn't have any standard issue shotguns and the Nasher was split between both the COG and the UIR. I could be wrong. And there was also like a chain gun that I'm assuming is what I have on screen here, but it looks quite different in the books. We know that the Marksa and the scoped Marksa was their all-around medium to long-range rifle that was shared between all of the infantry. It was their version of the Lancer, essentially, and that's what we had in terms of UIR weapons that could make a return to GearsOfWarE-DAY. And I say could because, like I said, the Coalition is doing a great job of incorporating a lot of weapons that were in the books but never had the fair spotlight in any of the games. Now, the COG had some really cool guns in the books and comics that never got to see the light of day, and I'm going to go into those. One is actually a LMG. So they had a mounted LMG chain gun that wasn't a mulcher. This was pre-Locust era. It wasn't a Vulcan turret either. This was a bipod or tripod mounted LMG that was belt fed, and it looked interesting. This was a COG weapon that was used. There was also a COG version of the Marksa just called the Marksman Rifle, and it was to bridge the gap and not have a bolt action weapon for medium to long range to counter the UIR's Marksa. And there were people in the COG that used it, notable people like Bernie, but Bernie actually had a custom-made Lancer that was a semi-automatic Lancer. And in the books, there are a plethora of custom weapons that I think translates into the culture of, E-Day, how we're trying to get into this new mindset of having weapons that we can customize and make our own with existing weaponry. So she had a Lancer that quite literally was just turned into a semi-automatic rifle. Now, I don't really know how that works, but I could just assume it's just, a single fire Lancer meant for long-range engagements. Another cool COG weapon that we never really got to see was called the Silverback rocket launcher. There was art done for it, but it was never really put into the games. It was probably one of the missiles that was attached to the Silverback mech that was able to be fired alongside the turret. And it was something that could be handheld. And adding on to COG explosives, because I feel like this is such a rare and missed opportunity, there was a handheld rocket launcher as well called the Long Spear rocket launcher. It was primarily used by the COG, and in Asphalt Fields and Jacinto's Remnant, the long spear is described as a heavy, unguided, or wire-guided rocket meant to punch through thick enemy armor rather than a traditional RPG. It was notoriously bulky, making it a burden to carry around in the field. Now, we have actually a lot of weapons in the lore that are kind of like this. One coming to mind is the Vulcan LMG. If you don't remember, in Gears of War 3, when you wanted to use the Vulcan, and I think in Judgment, you needed to have a partner to carry the ammo pouch and actually continuously feed the user ammo, or you couldn't just carry the gun around and use it yourself. You could, but then you run out of ammo, then you got to drop the gun, then you got to reload it manually, then you got to pick it back up again. So there was some payoff and risk and reward with carrying a Vulcan. You kind of needed to have somebody walking around with you continuously to use that gun. Another one is the Stomper. It's a belt-fed grenade launcher. So much like the Gut Puncher, it was initially a underbarrel attachment to the Lancer. This one was a standalone belt-fed grenade launcher, which I think took inspiration for the Gut Puncher we have in E-Day, which is a handheld belt-fed grenade launcher. Instead of it being, like this thing that's, got to be placed down on a tripod or bipod, and you use it stationary. So I think they took some aspects from both guns, combined it, and put it together. The other thing that I want to talk about now are some weapons we really didn't get to see in E-Day, like, the Boltok and T-Bow and stuff like that. So I'm going to put some weapons that we actually did not get to look at, and then talk about that, how they could work and stuff in the game. Some of the weapons that we didn't really get to see in E-Day that we know are legacy weapons that should return were the boom shot. The handheld version, at least, we know that it's a rocket grenade launcher. And we didn't really get to see much of it except of it being in like a turret/cannon form, which I don't know how they're going to be able to make that work for PvP, but I figure they might, just format it differently, or they might release the version we're used to later on. The torque bow was shown some snippets. And we didn't really see anything about the Hammer of Dawn. The next gun that I was surprised we didn't see at all was the Boltok pistol. And then there are some other notable guns that I wanted to talk about, such as the Vulcan turret and the Mulcher. We did see some of the Mulcher because Private Mako was using it in the Pay and Save store where he was fighting the Wretches. So we do know that the Mulcher is here, but we did not see the Vulcan. Now, a lot of people got confused and assumed that the gun he was using was the Vulcan because it sounded a bit like the Vulcan. I just think it's a new Mulcher sound. It's just a Mulcher. It looks like the classic Mulcher. But can see the Vulcan in some capacity. I'm not sure what, but it does have a chance to arrive. It is still a COG, weapon. And alongside it, we could see the return of the twin-barrel machine gun from the Pendulum Wars. This was a stationary machine gun that you could operate, and it was connected to 2 ammo boxes, and it was a very heavy-hitting, slow-firing gun, but it was just accurate and deadly. Simple to the core. Now, the other thing that I would love to see return alongside the Gears of War 2 Mulcher is the mortar. The mortar was so fun. You imagine, man, we get the mortar back in E-Day and it has the ragdoll physics, and we can like OE to another ring using the ragdoll physics. Like, you know how crazy that shit would be?
Get in here, bitch. You fucking heard me. No.
Ali, you're a nice guy.
Another gun that I think we could see return is the Gorgon pistol. It's the only SMG we had up until the point of Gears of War 4, and the only SMG that the Locust had created. It does look like something they manufactured from UIR parts. Looks fairly similar, but it's a gun that we can see return, and I do think that the Cantuses will make a return in E-Day in some capacity. So along with Cantuses, we're going to get ink grenades, and we're going to get the Gorgon SMG pistol. You see in the E-Day Direct some new Locust weapons and some new weapons altogether. So I put that on screen for you guys to see here, but actually in another Gears of War project known as Gears of War Redux, they actually give us the chance to use General Rom's handheld Troika cannon, and I'm going to play it for you guys here, and you guys can actually see yourselves how it sounds, how it functions. This just gives us a snippet into like maybe us being able to use downed bosses' weapons. Like if we kill them in Horde Siege, maybe we can pick up, like a legendary loot, type weapon that we can extract with us. Just food for thought and something to, ponder. moving back to E-Day, we got a screenshot here from one of the monitors while they play multiplayer, and it shows the Nasher with no attachments and 6 shells. I know. Wait, before you guys start panicking. Besides that, there doesn't seem to be any attachments in multiplayer, which is a surprise. I thought there was going to be, so I took some side-by-side gameplay looking at what was there, and it could have just been an ammo counter because I didn't see any of the bars that are present in Horde and in Campaign. So it looks like attachments won't be coming to multiplayer. For now, at least what I think. It could change, and that's due just to balancing issues and constantly having to change a weapon meta due to attachments. But the other thing that I want to harp on is the 6 shots in the Nasher. That is problematic because when you're in close quarters combat, there are not enough bullets in the Nasher for you to, burn through to get a kill. Depending on how far somebody is from you, and depending if you're hitting your shots, you're going to be running out of ammo pretty quickly with that shotgun. So unless they find some way to either add 8 bullets, or it comes down to Gears of War E-Day being focused more so about positioning, non-close quarters combat as much as the past games, but positioning, distance, crossing, playing through cover, out-angling, outplaying, and forcing those close range fights so that when they do happen, they matter, because when you're in close range, you're guaranteed a kill, and then you play off of that. That's the only thing that I can think of. Now, the next thing that I do want to talk about is the attachments and how they could work. I do have some gameplay from Gears Tactics showing, what attachments go on guns, swapping attachments, just the whole thing of what we can see in E-Day, and it might just be a little bit more expanded and developed. But we do see that there are infinite combinations for guns regarding scopes, barrels, magazines, melee attachments, so on and so forth. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is the lack of fire weapons that were shown. Like, there was nothing shown with the Scorcher, Incendiary Grenade. That doesn't lead me to believe that they're completely out, because in the E-Day Direct, they show a new blight of Locust called the Scorched Legion, and they're under the big baddie or mysterious main Locust enemy of this game called Vrock. Now, for everything in the lore and everything that the lore is kind of telling me from these hints is obviously this is going to be a new general, and we are fighting his, blight, and a blight in the Locust army is just like the group that you control as a general. General Rom's blight was the Bloodied Vanguard, and it consisted of Scourge, Germad, and basically, the unique Therons that he had, his Theron Elites and the Boomers and stuff. And those Locusts all had their own special attributes. Like the Therons were the ones that carried bladed, sawed-off shotguns that they could charge at you with and hit you with and one-shot you. Even the Boomers had like special hammers and stuff like that. Now that could just be a separate class of Boomer, but this leads me to believe that, we could also have melee weapons in this game, like the cleavers. We know in Gears 5 we had the breaker mace, but in Gears 5 they also had a big emphasis on combat knives. And when you would, execute somebody with a knife, or if you would use the knife, a character would not pull out the same generic knife, but a own custom knife, maybe something in the lore that they carry. It was unique. It was nice. And I do think that we could potentially see melee weapons making a big return in Gears of War E-Day if they're planning to diversify the sandbox. Obviously, this would probably be very usable in Horde and Campaign. Not so much in multiplayer. I don't really know how it would be useful in multiplayer. The breaker mace is pretty broken, and even then it was taken out of competitive play. So I don't really know how they would make it work. But, like Rom's knife, even in Rom's Shadow, we were able to use Rom's, knife as a primary. And like I said, going back to those Boomers of his Bloodied Vanguard, they had custom weapons themselves. It goes back to, in the lore, Locusts belonging to a special sector in the army and them specializing in something. I believe that, the Scorched Legion is going to just be like fire locusts that just, revolve around fire. I don't know. Just got me thinking. It's food for thought for you guys, but we know that the Locusts often take weapons that they find and retrofit them and make them their own. They add big knives on them and kind of downgrade them in a sense, but make them powerful and focus on making the guns less reliable and just overall hit harder. But you already know what General Rom is going to be talking about on E-Day. You already know General Rom is going to be, spreading the news, talking about how he dropped Shrock, and, the Uziel is his biggest op. I mean, you already know how it is, man.
Yeah,
King Von was your favorite op?
Hell yeah.
Okay.
Late night, we high as hell, on the phone tweaking with each other. He up stupid rolls on me. I'm broke in the trenches, up in big ass poles on him. Get that boy, you know when I catch you, you know what I'm gonna do.
When you guys are on the phone talking to each other.
Well, FaceTime, just kick.
FaceTime.
What's up, broski?
Without further ado, guys, I'm going to let you guys look at this section, the attachments, how it's going to work, the nitty-gritty of the video. I know this is the part that everybody wants to see. So without that, I will catch you guys in the next video. I'm thinking for the next video, we talk about potential prequel missions leading into the Pendulum Wars, and then we go back into Kelowna and stuff, and how we can see how Carlos dies. Just something that I want to make a video about. It's something that I've been thinking about that would make a lot of sense. We got it in Gears 4. We had some prequel-ish missions in Gears 5. So I definitely think we'll see a return to form in Gears of War E-Day. But without further ado, I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.